Luli. I'm a master's student at San Jose State University, and this is the rest of my team.
Hello, my name is Vishaka.
Hello, my name is Tanner O'Brien.
Hello, my name is Tom Durant.
Hey everyone, my name is Amanpreet Singh.
And then Alyssa Mickelson is the sixth member of our team. She unfortunately was not able to attend. And our advisor, Dr. Abbas Muallim, is out of the country, so he was also not able to attend today. And this is our proposed flow management data and services design prototype.
So for our introduction overview, our outline of our presentation will first start with the battle. Okay. Hello. Hello. Sweet. So for our introduction and overview, the outline of our presentation will first start with the background of our project and the purpose of it. Then we'll move on to our design and the design components that we made different and why we implemented them. Then for our prototype demonstration, we'll be demonstrating our high fidelity prototype and the changes that we made. Then we'll be concluding with the conclusion summarizing what we learned from our experience. So the purpose of the traffic flow management aid challenge is to design a new graphical user interface, or GUI, for the Federal Aviation Administration Automation System. The new system will be a part of the flow management data and services that will be used by traffic management. The new GUI will assist traffic management with their tasks. Some of the problems of the existing system are that in order to complete a task, it requires the user to do multiple tasks. Death by Windows occurs because the user is having to use an abundance of applications, and this can cause the system to crash. The application has a lack of visual continuity when transitioning the different pages. For our design steps, we first started with wanting to understand the users of the air traffic control system command center. We developed a user persona to help us define what our design goals are and the user's behaviors. Our user flows were next to define the primary functions of how users would operate the system. We did 3 interviews with current and former industry professionals to support our designs and understand the different associations between the different areas of the national airspace. For our design reviews and interaction, we reviewed our design with our advisor, the different former and current industry professionals. We did this in an agile model by collaborating with our mentor and other professional collaborators. We constantly adapted to the changings that they provided to us. Our prototypes from the suggestions that were given to us from our collaborators helped us further progress our design. We created a user flow diagram as a visual representation to understand how users of the system would use the program. Our flow diagram helped us understand what key points to focus on when designing for the users. We focused on 4 main components. They were for our users, such as the dashboard, the FEA, FCA, and the AFP. The flowchart also helped us empathize and of how our users would navigate our design.
The primary audience in mind when creating the persona were air traffic managers at the Air Traffic Control Systems Control Center. Our team was able to ensure the validity of our created persona by interviewing industry personnel within air traffic control and confirming our findings through the provided documents about the user. From the persona, our team was able to highlight issues air traffic managers face and conceptualize features they would want in their new application. Some of the issues they would like us to fulfill in our prototype are switching to more graphical/visual-based systems, efficiency when using the application, and smoother transitions from experienced users to new applications. Here are design goals our teams aim to tackle when creating our prototype. Main considerations for design decisions were to implement features that made new applications scalable, agile, and intuitive. Examples presented in the prototype that followed these main considerations were reducing redundancies, reducing mental models by emphasizing recognition over recall, and improving flow of the application.
So based on the identified user needs and the design goals that we had set, We went ahead with the actual design of the dashboard and prototype, which we'll show in a little bit more detail in the actual prototype in a minute. But in terms of the design goals, we wanted to create a very flat design so it was very easy for users to access all the main functions they were going to need in their day-to-day with only a couple of clicks. They wouldn't have to dig down too much. We wanted our design to be scalable so that additional features could very easily be added down the line that might not currently be visualized in the prototype. And we also wanted it to be customizable because we know that different users are going to have different needs in their day-to-day tasks in terms of what they're actually doing and therefore what information they need to see, as well as just preferences in how they want their information to be shown to them. We wanted our design to be very interactive, so everything that is on the screen is providing valuable information to the user. And then we also included a forecast mode that allows users to kind of look forward in time at the projected air traffic and projected weather based on the current available information, and use that as a tool to help make decisions when creating flow evaluation in constrained areas, as well as other traffic management initiatives.
So, staying consistent with our philosophy for FEA/FCA flows, we continued with an agile design that allows flexibility in adopting changes as necessary. Key changes in the FEA/FCA flows were made in the user interface design of the dialog box, but some changes were also made to the information architecture in order to facilitate flow for all possible users. We visually revamped the design to an updated user interface with a minimalist design. We swapped functions to make them more conducive towards better flow of operations. I'll highlight all the changes we made for creating, recalling, and viewing active FEA/FCA dialog boxes in our prototype.
All right, so let's take a look at the actual prototype. Alrighty, so taking a look here, this is the main dashboard view that a user would be faced with once they get logged in to the system. And so taking a look here, there are a number of items that they can do to kind of customize what they are looking at. So in this top filter area, we're able to control what FCAs and FEAs are on the screen, the different types of aircraft that are visible. Users are also able to create different customized views by clicking on this plus icon. They would be able to zoom in and move around if there's a specific part of the map that they want to see. And they can also then preset the filter items. So once they've set that, they can then click here, select an option, and everything's going to populate for them with all the information that they want to see in that particular setting. Additionally, it's very easy to see the weather by toggling it on and off, and just use that as a visualization tool when they do or don't want it. Again, we want everything to be highly interactable and providing information to the user. So, for example, when you click on an individual aircraft, you're able to see a quick snapshot of the information about the flight plan of that aircraft. So in this example, this plane is flying from Seattle to Los Angeles, and it departed under a ground delay program, which is going to dictate when it needs to arrive at its destination. As we'll see in a little bit, we preserved the existing graphs that are used for modeling the overall flight traffic under FEAs and FCAs, and we preserved the color system that is in place. So it's very easy and carries over for legacy users of the old system. And this visual cue on that departure time tells the user that that needs to be taken into account as the plane continues on its way. Moving on to the bottom part of this screen, we've got a pop-up window or bar of all the navigation options. For our final prototype, we focused on a single screen view because we know that in some situations that may be all that's available to a user, and we wanted to ensure that the layout is still very functional for them with that limited real estate. But we do also know that in some situations they may have multiple screens. And so in that situation, we envision that this bottom navigation bar and all the stuff that it contains could move over onto that second screen and be more pulled up simultaneously so they don't have as much layering of data that they have to work through. And then moving up to the top here, we've got a couple more customization settings. Similar to BYU, you can also create a dark and a light mode depending just on user preferences and what they want to see. And then the other main thing we want to highlight is the forecast mode. So by dropping down and transitioning to forecast view, users can now move forwards in time and kind of see what the projected weather is going to look like, as well as the projected flight paths based on what's currently been filed, and then use that as a tool to also help with decision making. We added this kind of blinking blue banner to make it really obvious to a user that the information they're not looking at, or that they're looking at, isn't live. Because when you're making decisions, obviously you need to be looking at the right information, and it should always be super salient if you're no longer looking at something that's current data and therefore may not even be accurate in a couple of hours. And Aman will take us through some of the FEA and FCA stuff.
All right, so when FEA/FCA is clicked from the navigation bar on the main page, it expands graphs that show a consolidated status of flights. These graphs can be expanded and minimized as necessary. At the top, the user is able to change the time intervals and navigate options through the drop-down menu. These graphs can also be popped out and moved around the map while everything else is minimized. This is done so that the user is able to view the map and still able to see all the details that they want to see and still visualize the graph information. Moving on to creating an FEA/FCA. We switched from radio to toggle buttons, which provide the user with more area to interact with buttons. This is based on the principle of Fitts' law, which states that the speed of performing an action is a function of the size and the distance of the target. Along with changing the style and size of the buttons, we also utilize the Gestalt principle of proximity to rearrange the layout for selection options to feel more intuitive. We removed some excessive boundary lines in each dialog box option to optimize space utilization. We retained much of the same functionality, such as when an FEA/FCA is created and a shape is selected, the user should be able to draw that shape directly on the map and rearrange its size. The time ranges used to have two separate input boxes for hours and minutes. We updated this to a modern design where the user just has to click it one single time and they're able to input hours and minutes. We merged the longitude and latitude tab, as well as the shared sites tab into the parameters tab as a side pop-up. Side pop-ups would automatically appear once a shape is selected. In practice, we also envision that these side pop-ups could be detached from the side and moved around the area as the user feels necessary. This is done to promote recall over recognition so that the user doesn't have to toggle between the top level tabs just to access all the information. Let's move on to the primary filters. Initially, all variations of the filters were available eminently, but we updated the design to pick and select filter options as necessary. This was done to minimize the clutter in a visual space and remove redundancies. This provides experienced users to potentially use the shortest path possible for their filter selection. They can add filters individually if a few are necessary, or they can add all of them at once and remove the few unnecessary ones. The categories that allow multiple selection are made saliently different from the toggle buttons to notify the user. Previously, this was done with text. Multi-select options would be distinguished from toggle options by stating user categories any of or aircraft categories any of. But we swapped the button style and selection color to inform the user that these buttons function differently from the toggle buttons. Let's move on to the Preferences tab. So for the visible time range and the selected time range, previously the design used to have up and down arrows, which didn't let the user see the minimum and maximum capability. Now that we switched that to a slider bar, which lets the user see exactly what's their minimum and maximum value. Let's move to the recall. So when the option to recall an FEA/FCA is selected from the drop-down options under the navigation bar, prototype brings up a list that is similar to the original design. An additional feature lets the user see more details of the parameters, particulars, beyond the details that are provided above the shape on the map. We also swapped the selection search bar from the middle to the top of the page. This is done to stay consistent with the user's mental model of a typical search bar layout. Once a recall FEA/FCA is selected, The user is taken back to the creation dialog box with specifics of the recall instance, auto-filled into the creation field, and can be edited by the user as they feel necessary. These changes are also reflected into the active FEA/FCAs. In practice, these dialog boxes would be very flexible. If the FEA/FCA area on the map is covered by the dialog box, the map could either zoom to the visible area on the right side of the screen or move the dialog box to the other side of the screen. As well, if there's a second screen support, that the dialog boxes could be moved to the other side. Let's move on to the AFPs.
For the AFP, let's go ahead and create a new AFP. So on this, on top to bottom, there's a slider. Previously, it was just a picker, and so they couldn't see the timings. And they have an option to also edit the start and end time. And then for the program read applicable only to include flights, we just cleaned up the UI on the top. But from R and within R, they also have the option for a more modernized time picker. And they also have a more edit button. For the interval and minutes, they can toggle between 15, 30, and 60 minutes. As you can see, as they toggle, it changes the table. For the table, on the top, there's a gray button indicating, or the grayish area, indicating that they cannot edit. But for the PR and pop-up, they can, indicating with the lighter and white color. And for the scope tab, so the main here that we visually changed was the two columns, non-exempt and exempt flights. We did that because they can clearly see the flights that are non-exempt and exempt, and if they wanted to convert, switch a flight from between them, they can just select one of them and click on the arrows based on the direction of the arrow and change it that way so that they can see all the flights and there's no checkboxes that were previously there. For the flights itself, if they wanted to exempt, there's a toggle button just so they can have an area to toggle back and forth and make sure that they can edit the minutes there directly because picking, I believe there was a picker there in which they couldn't see, so it's just easier for them to enter. For the general option tab, just a UI cleanup here with bigger text boxes and then making sure that they know the timing. When they edit the timing, it will be a modernized timing indicating the time and the minutes. And also checkboxes. So I'll pass it on to.
Yeah, and one thing we also wanted to just touch on is while we're kind of going over more of the functions of the actual dialog boxes, we do also envision this being a very interactive system. So for example, when you're trying to select different centers, you can kind of click and drag on the map. It's kind of a limitation of the prototype software that we couldn't totally show that. But so being able to, for legacy users who coming over from the old system and might have very set ways that they prefer to do things, trying to keep some of that consistent while also allowing users who might prefer to use the map more directly, being able to manipulate the items that they're creating there, visualize it very clearly, and do stuff along those lines.
Demonstrated from the prototype presentation, our team prioritized making our design of the application scalable, agile, and intuitive when approaching this challenge. We reinforce these ideas by applying design principles such as Gestalt and Fitts law, reducing redundancies across the application, improving mental models when completing tasks, and improving overall navigation of the system. Key things we gained from this competition were learning the importance of diverse perspectives. We got to work with people in air traffic control, air traffic management, UX designers, and human factors specialists. We also gained further appreciation of difficulties faced when designing for specific positions and learned the significance of reducing errors in a complex system. We'd like to thank everyone that helped us along the way. Our advisor, providing direction in our prototype design, interviewees for providing insights and suggestions, competition and judges, or competition coordinators and judges, for giving us this opportunity and providing feedback so we can learn from our prototype, and our peers in this competition for sharing their different approaches to the challenge and giving us this opportunity to learn from one another. And viewers like you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, San Jose, and for the fan service. We love to be thanked. We're going to go ahead and turn the Q&A session over to our judging panel first. So whoever has the first question, feel free to ask.
I'll go first. I might have missed it. Logging your actions or any NTML-like stuff in here. So once you put out an initiative, how would you log it?
Yeah, so this is something that we envision being very kind of built in, so it's less on the user in terms of them actually having to go through the log process. The actions that they're taking are going to automatically create the log, so it's less burden on them. There is still an option if they need to ever, create a manual log, but hopefully by automating that and creating some clear backend functionality so that everything can code correctly, then that's something that the user doesn't have to worry about nearly as much in their day-to-day.
Do you have that manual log piece in here?
It's very briefly visualized here. Gosh, put that guy away. 1 second.
That's right.
Broken interaction here. I'm going to just refresh. There you go. Yeah, so the logbook would kind of live here and probably be expandable if there's more detail that they want to see in this single screen view at least. And so yeah, if they needed to manually enter something, they'd be able to log it here.
A great job as well. I have a question about the ability to forecast weather through the play forward. And then also, did I understand that the flight trajectories would also envision the same? Can you talk through how that process will work?
Yeah, so that's something that hopefully as AI continues to develop or machine learning can be leveraged to, it's obviously not going to be a perfect system because when you're looking into the future, there are inherent uncertainties. But based on filed flights and what the plan is for those flights and where they are going to go, having that be shown as you're kind of moving forwards, and similarly with what the projected weather is, having that be visualized to the extent that it's possible.
I enjoyed your presentation as well. The one thing that stood out was on the data tag when you selected the flight plan. I liked the GDP, that you can see that it was a part of a GDP, because I know a lot of times the aircraft would have taken a delay on the ground and then for whatever reason something else happened. We would reroute them again in the air, not knowing that that aircraft was possibly a part of a GDP. So that's something for users to be able to be aware of when they're making decisions. My question though, chat, you didn't touch on the chat mode. How do you envision that? What do you envision that looking like?
Yeah, personally, that's something that I honestly had reservations on in terms of how built out chat should be, just because I know in past experiences when I've had chat in jobs, it can really slow things down when you're manually typing messages back and forth. And when a decision needs to be made, that's not ideal. So I personally envision it being more of kind of individual messaging, but a lot of the functions regarding shared, FEAs and FCAs would live more in the logbook and statuses being updated there.
I love that you started with a flow chart. Like I said earlier on the signal to noise thing, the flow chart speaks to my heart. How did you do that, or did you do that first, or did you try to come to make some decisions first and then go back to a flow chart? And if so, did that change anything?
And that was actually the topic of my question was, did you guys do any validation of that beforehand or before shifting?
Yeah, so we built out flowcharts more than just the one that we showed. We did a couple pretty early in the process just to try to understand how we thought the user would move through. We also unfortunately didn't have as many opportunities we weren't able to go visit an actual site. We were able to conduct some user interviews and just gain a little bit of feedback there. But yeah, the flows was very much us just trying to conceptualize with the information that was available to us and the resources, how we thought the user would move through the space and then use that as a tool to help design.
And to add on to that, we did show the flowcharts to our interviewees to see if they can validate them, and they approved of them.
Yeah, I had a question about something that I don't think I saw anywhere else, and that is you had something that showed private, public, the domain. So tell me a little bit more about that, because it speaks to me. I wonder if the operational folks can also get on board with that.
I can take it over. Yeah, so this is my understanding, a kind of carryover from the current system, in that you can dictate when you're, especially at the command center, when you're creating these different FEAs and FCAs, who is receiving them. If it's public, it's visible and going out to everybody. Private is going to be, just at the console of that user. Local is just going to be that center. And then shared is where you can kind of dictate if it's going to go out to multiple locations. So being able to specify that, and then specifically when you're sharing it, being able to specify who it's going to. And this would ideally be something that kind of smart autofills, where you can either type in the name of the center or the code for it, or if there's a specific user, then giving you the drop down of people that you could share it with. And ideally also, this is again a limitation of the prototyping software a little bit, but both the longitude and latitude, which is typically only a function of the polygon and line shaped FEAs and FCAs, would only populate when one of these two options is selected. And similarly, the share option to specify shared sites would only populate when you've selected that.
If the user has a need to look at multiple maps, how do you see them switching between different maps configured in different ways?
Yeah, so that would come back to this kind of drop-down option. So these would be kind of your presets. Currently, we don't have it configured where you could have multiple maps side by side. They're just kind of the main map on that dashboard. But then you could easily move between, this currently doesn't take you anywhere, unfortunately, but you could move between different views that you've set up. And when you set them up, you could also, if you wanted to specify, I want this to show all the active FEAs and FCAs. I want this to only show, commercial aircraft, things like that. So when you select it, it's going to give you everything.
So that plus sign is what's adding an item to the...
Correct, yeah. And then similarly in this navigation bar, users have the option to customize if there are other kind of sub-programs that are important to them that they want there.
And same question is for the others. Do you see this deployed as a desktop application or browser?
We had definitely envisioned it initially as more of a desktop, part of it being real estate. As you can even just see in the example, you've got the kind of the top bar of the web that's taking up space, and then your actual interactable space is then minimized X amount. I think, as always, you can work on minimizing the impacts of that if you want to roll it over to more of a web-based as well. But that was one of our main concerns.
Also want to add to that a little bit. The web-based applications get rid of the right-click ability, which is useful for a number of functions. And I think desktop applications, that's a big plus.
So I don't know if you did this on purpose or it was a happy accident, but the blue border that you put around the map when you're kind of modeling stuff out, that's what model mode in TFMS looks like. It doesn't blink at you, but it's a unique blue color and it's a border around there. So
that was a happy accident.
Good job.
And one more quick compliment, the proposal, the project plan, and the schedule and execution was very succinct, easy to follow and clear, and that also made looking at the prototype and the walkthrough very easy to comprehend each stage of the process. So kudos on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Judging panel, do we have any other questions? All right, I'd like to open the floor up to our audience. Go ahead and raise your hand if you've got a question for the team.
Seth again from Brigham Young University. This is just a really small thing, but I was curious, I might have missed it earlier when you were showing things. Is the colors up at the top a legend, or is that does that also allow some sort of filtering to go on up there at the top?
This guy?
Yeah.
Currently, it's mostly a legend. I think it was you guys who added the option of customizing weather and what's shown. Is that right? Somebody did, and that was a really good idea that I wish I had also thought of. But currently, it's just a legend.
Hi, Ferdy from Cal State East Bay. I don't have a question, but I just wanted to comment about the zooming and the prediction of weather. I thought it was a really smart move.
Thank you.
Not yet. Not yet. All right, go ahead and raise your hand if you've got questions for the team.
Hello, Alicia again. I didn't notice, and maybe I missed it. Did you have a concept about notifications and new information coming in, and do you have thoughts about how that might work?
Yeah, so that's not something that we've built out in a ton of detail. That would likely live through the log function. I think that would be a landing page for a lot of different things, and similar to having kind of a notification icon pop up in that navigation bar. Either as just a little circle or potentially the entire button to make it really visible to the user when something requires attention.
And adding on to that a little bit, the top empty space that we see right here, so considering it's an agile design, we left that so that any additional functions that need to be added, there's available real estate for that.
Other questions? Matt?
I have another one here. When you were showing two features that I wanted to make sure I understood right, the drawing feature of the FAA, FCA, and the filtering function, I think you were walking through those, but did you have them mocked up in any way in your prototype? I liked the responsive filtering thing and how you were clicking through the menus, and I just wanted to see if you implemented that in any way that I just missed in the prototype.
In here specifically, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So unfortunately, with just limitations to how Axure functions, we weren't able to create a walkthrough without walking over other stuff that we wanted to do. But yeah, we would envision it. Let me pull up the recall. Basically, it would be kind of visualized on the map where you're able to kind of draw your points. And then as you're making changes, it would reflect on the map. And then as well in the filters here with the latitude and longitude, it should be smart enough to fill that in, the actual parameters based on what you've drawn. For users who have a preference to manually type, it's also editable as well to make those changes.
Got it. Thank you for going back to that. I didn't catch that the first time. Thanks.
Other questions from the audience or from our judging panel?
Hi, John Crescenzo from Cal State East Bay. You were just showing that with the FCA, and then you add the longitude and latitude, right?
Yeah.
And so like the idea there, right, is that you can enter multiple and then it'll model multiple, right, in a sense, or?
So when the polygon and the line-shaped FEAs and CAs are drawn, the latitude and longitude coordinates are created to actually define the space that they're filling. So previously, that was its own separate tab. To us, it made sense to move it to the actual shape creation portion because that's what it directly relates to. And yeah, so if you are the type of person who loves just typing things in and that's the way your brain works, you can manually type it in and define the shape that you're creating. And if that's not your jam as much, you can draw it and it'll still map it for you.
Cool. All right.
Other questions?
So kudos to you on understanding all the intricate details of FEA, FCA creation. I think you're ready to go and like join the workforce. So in one of your kind of goals of the project, you talked about providing more autofill functions. So I know you mentioned them in, for example, the shared sites that you could enter those in many ways. Are there other spots where you're envisioning an autofill to facilitate form entry and, you know, alleviate the user from having to fill and type and all that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, certainly as much as possible, I think where it's identified that there are known things that a user is going to fill in, it should populate that, be that selecting specific airports, airlines, you know, all the sort of stuff that you're going to be filtering for, being able to start typing and just have things minimized as they stop being relevant. And then also anytime you're recalling something that's previously been created, all the information entry should be taken away from the user. They shouldn't need to go back in other than just to review and tweak it if it's changed relative to what they're doing now.
Other questions from our audience? Any other questions from our judging panel? And we don't have any on the live stream, right? All right.
Since we do have time, you know, I'm going to ask the question. I'd also love to hear from each of you what you found to be the most fun and interesting or exciting piece of this.
Who wants to start? Go, Tanner.
Hello. Probably for me is the process of having this big project and seeing it evolve over time was pretty fascinating and gratifying too overall.
I really loved interviewing experts and just seeing them watch our demonstration of the prototype and them being like amazed, being like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. And then there was one person we interviewed was like, this graphical is pretty bad. Thank you for updating it. Yeah.
For me, so the first year of grad school is heavily focused for us and the research side, and it was really cool getting to experience how to work with all the design tools and get to learn how to prototype. And it's understanding how much goes into making a complex system like this work. Yeah, it's very impressive.
For me, I just love planes, so all of this was really fun, but I definitely gained a lot of empathy for like when my flight is delayed, like why that happened, and there are usually very good reasons for it, unless it's United having a staffing shortage. That's on them, that's not on you guys at all.
For me, this was very interesting and really fun to work with my peers because I never thought that this complex and this, it was really exciting to see this complex and get to work on problem solving because I actually do love problem solving, and collaborating with peers was very fun, and interviewing with users and getting to know their insights. And then and when they say, oh, you actually nailed it, like it was fun. And then I was like, oh, wow. Okay, I'm glad. So yeah, that was really fun.
Any other questions? Oh, looks like we have a couple more.
Hi, Sanan from the University of Michigan. First of all, thanks so much for your presentation. And I know some of you dealt with canceled flights, so I could not tell if you are tired. Yeah, so one thing I wanted to ask you about is up there at the top, where you have polygon, line, circle, and then NAS. I might have missed this, but could you elaborate again on what the NAS button does?
So NAS is, if I'm remembering, like national airspace. So that's when instead of drawing a shape, you're selecting a specific like region to be the defined area.
So like a region of airspace you'd be selecting, basically.
Yeah, so if
Got you.
the, ZLC has staffing shortages at their main center, odds are the entire region needs to be accounted for when moving flights through there.
Okay, yeah, and I could even see like, for example, selecting certain sectors within like an ARTC. So yeah, no, that's really cool. Thank you.
Hi, Garrett Johns from Brigham Young University, and you just mentioned like how exciting it was to find the solution to your problem. So I'm curious, what was your process like of finding the right solution? Like, what sort of iterations did you go through? How did you explore different ways to approach this problem?
There was a lot of meetings over Zoom and conversations. I realize I've been talking a lot, but clearly I get excited about this. I think for me personally, just like trying to understand where the user is coming from and how, and a lot of it is inevitably going to be informed by your own life experiences, but how do you approach a situation when information is presented in front of you? What is the most intuitive but also functional way to go about making changes? I think for us, we focused a lot on for legacy users who are going to be coming off of the existing system onto the new one. Learning a new thing is never fun for anybody, and especially if you've got a really set system, and especially in a safety critical domain where you've got patterns that are really, really set, it's important to not disrupt that if it's going to potentially lead to errors, which is the worst case scenario.
Hello? Going off of what Aaron said, a lot of it also came to just like collaborating with a diverse group of people. I don't think we would have gotten as much if we just like talked to only air traffic managers, even though that's the main, people. Yeah, just with our group, we have a diverse skill set too, with us having some people in design, research, human factors, engineering, and psychology. I think it really, like, that collaboration allowed us to have the product we have today.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, last call for questions. Thank you very much.